Have you ever turned down a pay raise? Would you ever turn down a pay raise? Or do you know anybody that would ever turn down a pay raise? I think most people have never been in the position where they didn't need the extra money. But doctors in Quebec are protesting their own pay increase, telling the government that they don't want the extra money. In an open letter posted to its website, the group Médecins Québécois pour le Régime Public, which represents a variety of doctors and medical students, says that with many of the province's nurses and other healthcare workers at their wits' end, the money should be spread out throughout the healthcare system. Quote, "The only thing that seems to be immune to cuts is our salary," the letter reads. Now, as a Canadian that covers a lot of American news, this story seems uniquely Canadian. Turning down a pay raise is not something that I really have ever seen in American news. But with that said, there is a part of this story that I don't think is just uniquely Canadian. And that's the part where these doctors are standing in solidarity with their fellow workers. So this is something that we actually saw this week in West Virginia, as teachers there ended their strike only after ensuring that all state workers also got a 5% pay raise. But it has been funny to see this story about the Quebec doctors turning down the pay raise blow up in American media, including in USA Today and the Washington Post, which both put in brackets, yes, lower, as in, yes, this story is totally real. But let me go over the details just a little more. So this from CBC News. As a part of a deal reached earlier this month, the province's 10,000 medical specialists will see their annual salary rise from $4.7 billion to $5.4 billion in 2023, an increase of 1.4% each year. According to data compiled by the Canadian Institute for Health Information, specialists in Quebec make, on average, about $403,500 a year, compared to about $367,000 in Ontario. So when comparing Quebec to Ontario, you could objectively say that yes, doctors in Quebec make too much money, or at the very least make more money in Quebec than they make in Ontario. But it's also worth pointing out that Quebec's Health Minister Gauthier Barrette said that the initial agreement that was made in 2007 didn't account for the future budget cuts that Ontario faced. So, in other words, Ontario doctors would be making about the same amount of money that Quebec doctors do if it wasn't for the budget cuts in Ontario. Now, I thought it might be fun to try and look up how Canadian doctors, or how much Canadian doctors make compared to American doctors. Now, there's surprisingly not a lot of information about this. And that's because it's tough to compare how much doctors make because there's so many factors involved. There's the cost of living differences between all the countries. There's the specialists versus general practitioners that both make different sorts of money. The fact that Canadian doctors are public employees and American doctors are private. But there are ways to do the comparison, and The Star in a 2012 article breaks that down and then discusses some results from a 2004 study. So first, how they actually calculate the comparison. So number one, converting currency so that a dollar basically buys the same amount of goods in each. This method is called purchasing power parity, or PPP. And two, compare doctors' salaries to the average wage earned in that country. Policy analysts use both of these. So a recent paper put out by the OECD suggests that in 2004, Canadian general practitioners were paid about the same in PPP dollars as doctors in Switzerland and Austria, but less than those in the US, UK, and Germany. Using the comparison to average wages, however, Canadian GPs are among the highest paid in the OECD, just below the US, 3.2 times the average wage versus 3.4 in the US. And among specialists, Canadian specialists were again among the highest paid in 2004, at almost 5 times the average salary, although far behind those of the US, which was 50% higher. But over the last 10 years, according to the Canadian Institute for Health Information, physician compensation in Canada has basically doubled. So while pay for Canadian doctors has risen over the last several years, American doctors, on average, still make more money than Canadian doctors do. And despite that, Quebec doctors are still out there protesting their pay raise. Now, What came out, or what feeling made doctors come out against this raise? So I saw this quote in the CBC News article, and I found this kind of interesting. So Dr. Isabelle LeBlanc said members and non-members alike approached the group to say something about the raises, using words such as shame to describe their feelings about the pay hike. Shame. Shame was the reason that doctors in Quebec pushed back against this pay hike. They saw nurses working their asses off and not getting the same support that they were getting, and they felt bad about it. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is because it seems like shame really is a feeling that is uniquely Canadian, or at least something that the US could use more of. And you only have to look as far as your president. Donald Trump has no shame. None. And while I have my issues with Justin Trudeau, I don't think he's in that camp. Trump really does do and say anything he wants to do or say. And if you come back at him, he's just going to sit in his same spot and defend his position and say that you are wrong and I am right. Regardless of how it looks, and it doesn't look good on him, but he pretends it does. And somehow that works on a lot of people. So I'm not sure if it's something in the water or what it is, but I feel like shame is a feeling that more Americans, at least in certain spots, certain political persuasions, could use. But even apart from that, apart from shame, apart from this pay raise, I think what I take away from this story is that when workers stand together, you are stronger. So here we have doctors standing with nurses, and in West Virginia, you had teachers standing with other public employees, demanding that everybody benefit, not just themselves. And when we do that, we're able to actually push for real change that can better the lives of everyone. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.